So back in July, I played Mass Effect 2 for the first time. I'm not one for recency bias, but I'm putting it out there that Mass Effect 2 is the greatest game ever. Released on January 26, 2010, Mass Effect 2 was greeted with universal praise from both critics and fans. Ever since I explored the original trilogy of Mass Effects a few months back, it felt like each week my personal favourite game between the three of them kept changing. So obviously the most logical solution was to spend hours on end diving into each one of these games to refresh my memory and to determine which is my favourite Mass Effect game. However, in doing so, not only have I realised that Mass Effect 2 is the best one out of the trilogy, but it might also be one of the greatest games ever made, and here's why. Before I dive into this, over 95% of all my viewers aren't subscribed to the channel. Take this very moment to quickly subscribe, I really do appreciate it, thanks. Anyways, Mass Effect 2 is arguably one of the best examples of doing a sequel right. I'll always be amazed at the universe that the original Mass Effect game swiftly introduced, and to me, Mass Effect 2 built upon it and refined it further. Out of all the intro sequences from the original Mass Effect trilogy, Mass Effect 2 felt the most epic. The destruction of the Normandy, the rebirth of Commander Shepard, and the introduction of Cerberus and the Elusive Man was expertly executed by Bioware. And let's focus on the story for a second. I think Mass Effect 2 is one of my favourite games to now play through with how the story is laid out and how the player experiences it. For the majority of the game, Commander Shepard needs to put his crew together before heading into the unknown via the Omega Relay, aka a suicide mission. Usually I don't have much time for AI companions in other games, typically because I find them bland and usually the skip dialogue option is used frequently. But Mass Effect 2 breaks the mold here. The cast of characters for your squad is diverse and unique, with their backstories and side missions designed to make you care about the people you're recruiting for this final mission. Honestly, what I love most about Mass Effect 2 is that the story doesn't feel insulting or overly complex. The goal of getting through to the Omega Relay, dealing with the Collectors and beyond is fairly straightforward, but Bioware does an amazing job in dressing up this storyline that keeps gamers hooked throughout. And this all leads towards the suicide mission, the finale of Mass Effect 2, and probably one of the greatest missions I've ever witnessed within gaming. I was such a total noob for this during my first playthrough, with quite a few squad members of mine dying, but moving past that, the suicide mission is designed so perfectly to incorporate the story aspects, the time you put into building your squad, seeing them all in action, and trying to survive with as little casualties as possible. And this final mission delivers. Seriously, it's really hard for me to think of finales that tie the entire story into one level and makes it rewarding to play through. Moving on, the atmosphere, dialogue, and music deliver the second Mass Effect 2 begins. In fact, with how Mass Effect 2 delivers in almost every category you can think of, it strikes me as the closest thing to a perfect video game. If Mass Effect 2 was a movie, it would be Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back, and I think the game does more than enough to deserve such a comparison. It's the closest thing gamers have to experience a space story that's as immersive and fun to play. Whilst Mass Effect 2 arguably doesn't further the overarching plot as much around the Reapers compared to Mass Effect 1 and 3, I find it to be an incredibly important game in continuing to expand the Mass Effect universe, introducing new worlds, species and characters to us. It took everything I enjoyed from the original Mass Effect title, expanded on areas that needed improving such as combat, and ended up delivering a sequel that in my eyes is a complete masterpiece. The 30 odd hours you can spend playing Mass Effect 2 is tied up perfectly in the final few hours of the game, to an extent I've never seen another game pull off. Ever since God of War was released back in 2018, the game had been my undisputed greatest game of all time, but honestly in comparison to Mass Effect 2, it feels like it's going to take a few years for a new game to displace the podium I've placed Mass Effect 2 on. The game was released back when Bioware was truly firing on all cylinders. If the next Mass Effect game is able to capture the magic from this title, then the future is very bright for the series. Do you agree that Mass Effect 2 is the greatest game of all time? Is Mass Effect 1 or 3 the better Mass Effect game? As always, let me know down in the comments. I'll see you on the next video. Peace.